All right, so today we're going deep on the American Revolution.
Yeah.
We've got some excerpts here from the America podcast, their episode on the Revolution.
Okay, cool.
And we're going to kind of dig into, like, how did the American colonies go from, thriving under British rule one day to declaring independence and then winning a war against, the biggest, baddest empire in the world at that time.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating story. When you think about it.
Yeah.
One day you're, relatively prosperous part of this global empire.
Right.
And then the next, series of taxes and restrictions coming from a government thousands of miles away that you have no say in. I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, so let's set the stage here a little bit. We're talking mid-1700s life in the American colonies. It was, pretty good for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, generally it was a time of prosperity. People were, relatively free. They had their farms, businesses. They were doing their thing.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have this big conflict, the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763.
Right.
Britain wins a huge victory, but it costs them a ton of money, right?
Yeah, major victory, but massive debt.
Yeah, so now they got to figure out how to pay for all this, and they turn to the colonies and start imposing all these taxes, and of course the colonists are like, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just, a general tax. It was taxes on specific goods that colonists used every day.
Oh, right. Like what?
Like legal documents, newspapers, even playing cards.
Playing cards?
Playing cards, yeah. I mean, things that impacted their everyday lives.
Wow, so it wasn't just like, some abstract tax that they never really felt.
Yeah.
It was like right there in their face.
Right in their face every day.
Yeah.
And that really fueled the resentment.
Right. But didn't the British Parliament claim to represent the interests of all British subjects?
Yeah, they had this concept of virtual representation.
Virtual representation.
Yeah. Basically arguing that members of Parliament considered the well-being of all British subjects, even those who didn't have, directly elected representatives.
Okay, but, how do you convince a blacksmith in Boston that some nobleman in London is looking out for him?
Yeah, exactly. That argument didn't really fly with the colonists.
No wonder they were shouting, no taxation without representation.
Yeah, that became a huge rallying cry.
So it started with taxes, but it seems like it quickly became about something much bigger, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this financial frustration morphed into this deeper ideological struggle.
Like what?
Well, they started questioning the entire power structure,
Right.
Like, do these rulers really understand our needs? We're thousands of miles away.
Right. It's like when your roommate keeps eating your leftovers without asking.
Yeah, but on a much grander scale.
Exactly. And the thing's really boiled over in 1770 with the Boston Massacre.
Right. British soldiers firing on a crowd of colonists, killing 5.
I mean, that's got to be a huge turning point.
Oh, absolutely. It just inflamed public opinion.
It's crazy to think about how news traveled back then. No internet, no social media.
Right. They had newspapers' broadsides.
Broadsides, what are those?
Like big posters, basically.
Oh, okay.
And, a pretty efficient network of communication.
Really?
News still traveled surprisingly fast.
I guess word of mouth can be pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you have something as dramatic as the Boston Massacre.
And then a few years later, you have the Boston Tea Party.
Right. 1773.
Now, that's often portrayed as this, simple act of defiance.
Yeah.
But the podcast mentioned something I'd never heard before.
Oh, what's that?
They said the colonists actually tried to pay for the tea.
Yeah, that's a detail that's often overlooked.
So what really happened?
So they wanted to pay the East India Company directly.
Okay.
But the British governor refused.
He refused money.
Yeah, he insisted they had to pay the tax as imposed.
Talk about a power play backfiring.
Yeah, it just pushed the colonies closer to the edge.
So you have all these incidents, all this tension.
Yeah.
And then boom, 1775, the British march on Concord to seize colonial weapons.
Right, they were trying to disarm the colonists.
And then the Minutemen meet them at Lexington, and shots are fired.
And that's the start of the war.
I mean, it's wild how one thing just led to another.
Yeah, this clash of ideologies about representation, self-determination.
Right.
It escalated into a fight for freedom.
And then less than a year later, you have the Declaration of Independence.
July 4th, 1776.
I remember reading that in school and thinking, these guys were serious.
Oh, yeah, they were laying it all out there.
But the podcast pointed out something I hadn't really thought about before.
What's that?
Those words, all men are created equal.
Right.
Like, that wasn't just some nice-sounding phrase.
No, it reflected these deep philosophical debates happening at the time.
So, who were they reading? What were they influenced by?
Thinkers like John Locke.
John Locke.
Yeah. His ideas about natural rights, the social contract.
Right.
Those ideas formed the basis of their arguments.
So it was a revolution built on ideas.
Exactly. But those ideas had to be defended on the battlefield.
Right. The Revolutionary War.
It was a brutal war, a real test of their commitment.
Yeah, we often focus on the big victories like Washington's surprise attack at Trenton.
Right, or the turning point at Saratoga, which brought France into the war on the American side.
Right, but what about the hardships? Like, what was the toughest part?
Oh, man, Valley Forge?
Valley Forge.
The winter of 1778?
Yeah.
Washington's army was just decimated by disease, starvation, despair. It was brutal.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but they endured it. It's a real testament to their belief in what they were fighting for.
And eventually it paid off. They win the final victory at Yorktown.
Right, 1781.
And then the Treaty of Paris recognizes American independence.
It's an incredible story of resilience and against all odds success.
Yeah, but it didn't end there, right?
No way. The legacy of the American Revolution continues to inspire people all over the world.
Like, what are some other revolutions that were inspired by what happened in America?
Well, that's something to think about.
Yeah.
But it's clear that those ideas born in the midst of conflict, they continue to shape the world we live in today.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Anytime. It was a great conversation.
Until next time.
See you then.
All right.
Yeah, bye.